Hello everyone, this is Dr. Shaheen. Today let us discuss on HTTPS, Secure Shell and Mobile Device Security in Cryptography and Network Security. This HTTPS stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol over Secure Socket Layer. That is, it is a combination of HTTP and SSL or TLS. TLS is Transport Layer Security to secure communications between browser and server. This is documented in RFC 2818 and no fundamental change is required either in SSL or TLS when we apply this. So usually this HTTP uses port number 80 whereas this HTTPS uses port number 443, and this encrypts URL, document content, data, cookies, HTTP headers and so on. This is done prior to transmission and decrypts a message upon arrival. So the uses of HTTPS is connection initiation and connection closure are the major responsibilities. Connection initiation, we will be using TLS handshake and then HTTP request. So connection closure, first the HTTP record it should encounter a message close. After that, close notify alerts are given to TLS level exchange and then TCP connection can be closed. So it must be able to handle abnormal TCP close before alert exchange sent or completed. So this is the advantage of HTTPS, and it is able to connect server via HTTP secure for generating keys, certificate signing request, self-signed certificate, certificate authority signed certificate and configuring web server. So as we know that certification authority is an entity that issues digital certificates for use by other parties. Example is VeriSign, GeoTrust, etc. There are certain limitations with HTTPS. An HTTPS server can only provide one virtual host behind a single socket because it is opposed to HTTP socket, where HTTP will be providing for multiple hosts, whereas here it will be HTTPS will be supporting only virtual host, one virtual host. This is because all security negotiation takes place before the HTTP protocol starts its transmissions, and hence before the server knows which URL the client is asking for. So this is the major purpose of HTTPS, and it cannot prevent stealing confidential information from the pages that is cached on the browser. So this is the major drawback, since in SSL data it is encrypted only during transmission on the network. It is clear in the text in the browser memory, which is easy for the intruder to hack. So HTTPS is slightly slower than HTTP because it adds additional computational overhead as well as network overhead. Next, SSH. The three core security requirements of a remote access technology is confidentiality, integrity and authentication, as we discussed this already in Unit 1. So most of the earlier technologies lack confidentiality and integrity. For example, Telnet and FTP, they transmit username and passwords with clear plain text only. So they are vulnerable to attacks such as IP spoofing, DOS and eavesdropping. So Secure Shell satisfies all the three requirements by using data encryption to provide confidentiality, host-based or client-based authentication, and data integrity using MACs and hashes. So this is the need for SSH. So there are two incompatible versions of this SSH protocol. They are 1 and 2, SSH 1 and 2. So SSH 2 was introduced in order to fix several bugs in SSH 1. So it has certain new features such as both versions have technical glitches and are vulnerable to attacks. But SSH 1 is more popular due to licensing issues. But SSH 2 it has better features compared to 1, and OpenSSH is a free version of the SSH with open source code development. So it supports both the versions and mainly used in Unix environment. So coming to SSH protocol exchange, once the secure connection is established, client attempts to authenticate itself to the server. So some of the methods used for this are Kerberos, rhost and rhost SSA, public key, password based authentication, that is OTP. So integrity checking is provided by means of weak CRC32 and compression is provided using deflate algorithm of GNU, that is gzip utility. So it is beneficial for file transfer utilities such as FTP, SCP, etc. So this is the overview of data exchange using SSH1. Once the server is authenticated, data transfer takes place. Next, SSH2. So SSH1 is monolithic, which encompasses multiple functions into single protocol, whereas SSH2, it has been separated into modules and it consists of three protocols. Those are transport layer protocol, here, then authentication protocol, and this third one is connection protocol. That is, we refer them as SSH trans, SSH auth, and SSH con. Coming to transport protocol, this provides initial connection, packet protocol, server authentication, and basic encryption and integrity services. So SSH authentication protocol verifies the client's identity at the beginning of SSH session by three authentication methods, that is public key, host-based, and password. Here. A fourth protocol, that is next one is SSH connection protocol. This permits a number of different services to exchange data through the secure channel provided by SSH transport protocol. So the fourth protocol is SSH protocol architecture, which describes the overall architecture. So all the protocols are still in draft stage. So we are not yet implemented. But let us go through the comparison between SSH1 and 2. In SSH1, it is, as we know, it is monolithic protocol, whereas SSH2, it has separate transport, authentication, and connection protocols. And SSH1 is weak, it has weak CRC32 integrity check, but in SSH2 we have strong cryptographic integrity check. Server key is used for forward secrecy on session key, but in SSH2 no server key is needed because we are using Diffie-Hellman key exchange, and it supports public key certificates, whereas in SSH1 there is no certificate authority. The algorithms supported by these SSH are: in SSH1, RSA, MD5, CRC32, triple DES, IDEA, DES are supported, whereas the algorithms used in SSH2 are DSA, DH, SHA1, MD5, triple DES, Blowfish, Twofish, CAST128, IDEA, etc. are used. So periodic replacement of session keys are possible in SSH2. So comparatively, SSH2 has more advantage than 1. So secure shell does have certain types of attacks. Though it is strong in encrypting data, it has certain types of attacks such as eavesdropping, name service and IP spoofing, connection hijacking, insertion attack, etc. So however, it fails against these attacks such as password cracking, IP and TCP attacks, flooding, TCP RST bogus ICMP, TCP desynchronization and hijacking, traffic analysis, and covert channels. So some vulnerabilities are in general in SSH. First one is open SSH challenge response authentication buffer overflow. So this is an hostile modification to SSH client that floods the server with authentication responses and causes a buffer overflow. This is available in SSH2. Next, passive analysis of SSH traffic. Here it lets the attacker obtain sensitive information by passively monitoring encrypted SSH sessions. The information can later be used to speed up brute force attacks on passwords, including initial login password and other passwords that are appearing in the interactive SSH sessions. So this is applicable in both SSH1 and 2. Next, key recovery in SSH protocol, that is 1.5. This vulnerability, that is, it leads to the compromise of session key. So once the session key is determined, the attacker can proceed to decrypt the stored session using any implementation of the crypto algorithm used. So this will reveal all information in an unencrypted form. It comes under SSH1. And the last one is CRC32 integrity check vulnerability. As we know, this is available in SSH1. It is based on weakness of the CRC32 integrity, and that becomes exploitable due to CBC and CFB feedback. As we know, there are 5 modes of operation. These 2 feedback modes are affected under this cyclic redundancy check. This is our overview of SSH. Next, moving to mobile device security. Generally, what do we do with mobile devices? We have phone service and text messaging. We do personal email, scheduling appointments and reminders, accessing social websites, and listening to music, watching videos, playing online games, online shopping, banking, sometimes the document and other data storage that are available with our mobile devices. So information stored in mobile devices, in general, we'll be having usernames, contacts, passwords, cookies, location data, personal information, application data, confidential and official, transaction history, and above all, we'll be having the device name, network connection name, IMEI number, UDID numbers, etc. So these are the overview of mobile devices. So to ensure mobile device security, we should ensure the portable data storage, wireless connection, third-party application, data integrity, and data availability. These things to be secured. So we have to ensure security of mobile device, mobile data, and mobile applications. Now coming to threats to mobile devices, first is mobile malware. So this is available in smartphones and tablets and that are susceptible to worms, viruses, trojans, spyware, which are similar to desktop. Okay, as we know, worms are repeatable, multiplicable viruses, and viruses are will ruin the operating system. And trojans and spyware are variations of viruses. Mobile malware can steal sensitive data and rack up along long distance phone charges and collect user data. So this is the major drawback with this malware. Whereas eavesdropping means wireless networks have good link level security, but they lack end-to-end upper layer security. So data sent from the device to the outside world is often unencrypted. So intruders eavesdrop on user sensitive communications. Coming to unauthorized access, this is also applicable to emails, applications that are available in Play Store, social media profiles, multimedia files, and more. Theft and loss. Mobile devices are easily susceptible to loss and theft. So, leaving our phone in a taxi or getting phone stolen using a bus commute or data stored in such devices is at risk. So, the data could be corporate mails, passwords, bank statement, or other crucial information. So, these are the threats when we lose our mobile. And last one is unlicensed and unmanaged applications. So this is very important and technically we should be aware of this. Popular applications have vulnerabilities that are open for exploits. So the security threats posed by unlicensed applications are more vulnerable, and whether these applications are licensed or not, they must be updated regularly to fix vulnerabilities that could be exploited to gain unauthorized access to our confidential data. So we have to be careful while providing access to confidential data, and the same permissions should be verified. And malicious and suspicious app activity should be monitored that allows the system to unstable state. So to handle the mobile security, we use 3 major techniques. One is authentication and the other one is encryption and filtering. So these 3 helps us to overcome these threats. So coming to authentication, this is the process of determining whether someone is to identify someone who it is and what it is declared to be. And user authentication is usually handled with username and password combination or biometric identification or PIN number, etc. So ultimate aim here is to ensure that device access to authentic users only. So mobile devices by default are not password enabled. So however, most of the devices have technical capability to support authentication such as password, PIN, pattern, screen lock, biometric readers, etc. So it is up to the users to ensure that we are enabling these features. Next is encryption. This is conversion of data into a form. We refer to them as ciphertext, and that cannot be easily understood by unauthorized people. So it is method of converting plain text to encoded text, which is unreadable by intruders. So encrypting mobile devices helps us in securing data stored on mobile device or while transferring data to other mobile devices. So most mobile devices have data encryption capabilities. So it limits the ability to intruders to obtain the readable and recognizable data, and also makes it difficult to generate important data for authentication. That is the drawback with encryption. Next is filtering, and this is the process of removing threats arising due to web access or email or downloading an apps. So mobile devices by default they do not have this capability, but while encountering some web pages and email attachments are often used as carriers of viruses and malware attacks. So filtering can be done with the use of mobile security software that is not a default facility provided by mobile devices. We should take care to download such applications. So to prevent damage from theft or loss, we should set a PIN number or a password, then automatically screen locks, and we should back up our contact information so that we can uh, use it in future, and install a security application, then turn on the encryption and location settings, enable remote wipe if available, and act immediately if lost, report to the authorities. Also, we should review application permissions. We should take time to read the small print what information does the app require to access to. While encrypting the phone, the device data to make we should encrypt the phone data to make it difficult for intruders to gain access and understand sensitive information. And the major thing that we can use to secure our mobile data is mobile device management enterprises. So this app allows enrollment of corporate devices over seamless cloud-based solution for mobile devices within the enterprise. Once a device is connected to the corporate network, an authorized administrator can manage and control the mobile fleet. So MDM solutions secure, monitor and manage mobile devices within the enterprise. It also blocks phishing and malicious websites and filters web access. Thank you.